The net zero devotees want us to believe that we're all going to die because of fossil fuel and flatulent farm animals. This is very questionable. Unquestionable, however, is that we won't survive without the farmers and the food they produce.
I understood that ignorance of the law was no excuse, so their views is really irrelevant on whether they're being negligent or not.
And why after 8 months have I not had any response?
Good evening. I have 3 questions tonight. Firstly, has this panel scrutinised the decision this council took in declaring a climate emergency? If not, it needs to examine the basis upon which that decision was made. Declaring an emergency is a serious business, especially considering the millions of taxpayer money being spent on implementing measures, many of which are highly detrimental to society. 9 months of emails back and forth with council officers requesting evidence of a human-caused climate emergency, and no one has been even able to precisely define the alleged emergency, let alone provide the evidence for it. Officers direct us to the IPCC, an organisation that uses cherry-picked start dates for their charts and inaccurate computer-generated climate models, which have been shown to be up to 3 times higher than actual temperatures. Incidentally, the IPCC have themselves never declared a climate emergency. It was left to councillors to research if there was a genuine man-made emergency. How many had either the time or inclination to do this properly? No one denies the climate is changing, it has done for millennia, but evidence must be provided that the warming is occurring because of CO2 rather than solar cycles, etc., and specifically the minuscule amount of CO2 that human activity produces. Since virtually no one was listening when I spoke about CO2 at full council, I will reiterate. Working independently, Dr. William Happer and Dr. John Christie clearly demonstrates that even if CO2 levels double to 800 parts per million, the resultant warming would only be around 1%. Produce the scientific evidence that disproves Dr. Happer and Dr. Christie and categorically shows the tiny levels of CO2 that human activity produces can produce significant warming. The people have had enough of baseless propaganda, from weapons of mass destruction to stay inside or you'll kill Granny. Net zero is a crusade that is being waged against the people, and our farming industry will be the first casualty if we're not careful. The net zero devotees want us to believe that we're all going to die because of fossil fuel and flatulent farm animals. This is very questionable. Unquestionable, however, is that we won't survive without the farmers and the food they produce. This brings me on to my second question. Do any of the council's plans or documents include food security? If not, this too must be urgently scrutinised. It would, after all, be prudent to make such provisions for the people who pay for this council's very existence. Finally, I've been told that councils have a legal obligation to provide land for people to grow food. If that is true, is this being done sufficiently? Or are bicycle lanes taking precedence these days? Thank you.
On your last point, the good news is that there are some allotmenteers meeting in the next room, talking about their allotments and how to make the most of those plots. And I, as a 50% allotment owner, do grow my own food that way as well. So good thing to raise. Your fundamental question around have we scrutinised the climate emergency? Well, we haven't, have we, in this forum, in here? I'm going to make you an offer. If I'm re-elected in May, we will scrutinise it in this forum, because I've seen and heard enough of your presentations to intrigue me enough to want to scrutinise it. And this is a spoiler. I say that as someone who didn't vote for a climate emergency in the chamber, because I wasn't elected when that vote was called. And so the information that you are continually bringing here is such, rather like what we talked about earlier this evening. There are legitimate questions. And the best form of disinfectant is sunshine. So I welcome the conversation. And if I'm elected after May, if the panel are minded, I'm very happy to bring it here as a formal item and have a substantial look at it for you, if that's okay.
That's a brilliant offer. I hope your colleagues are as open as well. And I know Councillor King is also keen to have a debate, and I realise you've got a lot on your plate with the budget, etc. But if we can have a date, we can bring those climate scientists in, because it's all very well us turning up, but why should you believe us? You need to ask the climate scientists. So if you can provide us with a date, we will bring them and you'll be able to ask them for yourselves, because we have it in writing from your climate officers that no dissenting information was looked at. And that simply isn't acceptable. This council must consider all the available information. Thank you very much. And in all seriousness, the UK farmers will not survive if these net zero policies are forced upon them. The net zero industry is worth over $4 billion a day. Now, it's one thing putting in a whole load of solar panels, but it's quite another to destroy the farming industry, which is exactly what is going to happen if we keep going along with this madness. To learn more, watch the interview I did with Sandy Adams. And if you haven't got time for the 40-minute one, I did a 15-minute abbreviated highlights video. So I do need to apologise to Councillor King. I didn't have my glasses with me, and when I sat down, I knew he was in the room somewhere, but the position I was in, Councillor Burrows obscured him. So in the corner of my eye, I could see to one side there was an older, smartly dressed gentleman. So I addressed what I was saying to him. It's not until I got up and could see above Councillor Burrows that I could actually see where Councillor King was, the other side of the room. So it turned out I was addressing Councillor Sonics, not Councillor King, which must have confused them both. So I do apologise for that. Must be all that video editing I'm doing, only looking this far away from me. Let's hope I never witness a serious crime and are called on to identify the perpetrators if I'm not wearing my glasses. So anyway, let's now move on to what Karina had to say.
I should have asked Rachel for some allotment advice, shouldn't I? And some gardening advice. Okay, Karina, you know the drill. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. We have not received a proper answer to our question of who advised the Deputy Mayor she had the authority to shut down a member of the public from speaking, nor have you provided us with the evidence of the legal opinion we've asked for regarding subjecting members of the public to searches. Why are council and council officers specifically unable or unwilling to produce answers to the questions we have? How can that be serving the public? This willful prevarication is becoming absurd. Nearly a year since requesting evidence for man-made climate change, you produced none. We asked to the law upon which you are relying to breach the peace in searching us. You provide nothing. We are asking on what basis you shut down the public inalienable right of free speech. Answer us. Councillor Dundas said in the full council meeting on the 18th of October last year, Colchester City Council is a construct created in 1974 which may or may not survive for however long. On the evidential basis that it no longer serves its master, indeed does everything in its power to avoid us, then perhaps it is time for us to be rid of it. Finally, an important matter I'd like to draw to your attention is that this council is complicit in granting planning permission for fraudulent 5G applications. Companies are giving councils declarations that they are complying with ICNIRP safety recommendations using names of companies that do not exist. 3 UK Limited was dissolved on the 27th of October 2017. The operator H3G was dissolved on the 9th of December 2014. We have printed out an example of a mat that was given permission at Highwoods under the guise of a dissolved company. Insurance company won't insure harm caused by EMFs, and the telecommunications industry are warning investors they will need to provision for compensation, all the while telling everyone it's safe. In addition, there is a recent study by oncologist Lennart Hardell which conclusively demonstrates 5G to be harmful. With this in mind, how will the public get compensation for safety declarations made by dissolved companies and dissolved operators? Is the council putting itself at risk of claims against the council by granting these permissions? This is happening up and down the country, not just in Colchester. How can that be? That council officers are acting negligently in not performing their due diligence in respect of these fraudulent applications and putting both the public and the public purse at risk. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. On your last words about council offers potentially being negligent. I'm not sure that was a fair suggestion, given that I'm unaware that a planning officer has to do due diligence around the structures of the applicant. So I don't think they're negligent. So I'm just going to state that. With regards to your, and you've mentioned this before, the searching and the shutdown of a member of the public, I was under the impression you had been given an answer for that.
We haven't received a proper answer for that. We've had things in writing, but we want the evidence, please, not just someone's opinion. You know, evidence, the legislation, and not just someone's words, because as I've expressed before, trust is an issue. And it's not just me, it's the ubiquitous nature in which we're ignored and given answers that don't have any substance to it. So a substantive answer is really what we're after, that covers the legality and the lawfulness. Thank you.
Okay.
Karina, welcome. I do start and end with an absolute trust that our officers work within the law to the best of their understanding of it. That, I think, is always a fair question. Do they understand all of the tests that might be appropriate? That we'll take away. We do that trust, and we have that trust because of past experience and because we are bound by the law, whether or not everybody here agrees with how that's framed, which I think is partly driving the question. And if I could just go to the heart of the point about trust, the fact that you can come here and have such a, I hope, quality conversation, at least I feel it is, and offer from the chair before, I hope is in itself at least a partial answer.
I don't think I've really got a response to that, other than still a year, no evidence. If that's how you feel, and the views, you know, on their understanding, I understood that ignorance of the law was no excuse. So their views is really irrelevant on whether they're being negligent or not. Thank you.
I don't know who's more jaded by this conversation, Karina or the council. Now, whilst I can't speak for Karina, one thing I can tell you is, as a fellow Taurian, once she decides she's going to do something, she won't let it go. So she will pursue this to eternity, so you might as well just give her the answers she's looking for. Anyway, moving on. Cheryl's up next.
I'm here today to follow up on some issues I thought would have been addressed by now, seeing as I have been assured a few times it would be. On the 6th of June 2023, I came to support friends at Have Your Say, only to be met by a surprise search by a security guard using an electronic device. He proceeded to push my ankles apart, saying, "Open your legs." Then the wand was run up and down my inner thighs, touching in places. On top of this, most of the contents of my bag were emptied, looked at, including a very private letter. This whole incident is something I would have rather forgotten about. However, even after putting in a complaint, others asking on my behalf, nothing has been followed up despite being told it would be. To say I'm disappointed is an understatement, and it has taken me a while to pluck up enough courage to come here to talk about it. In a day of protecting women's rights, it is astonishing this can be set to one side in what seems to be, we are not going to deal with Pyle. The complaint was made on the 16th of June 2023 via the council's website. I had confirmation it was received. Also, as I understand, there is a camera in the foyer. How long do you keep this footage for? And is that why there is a delay? Is it deleted after a period of time? Can someone please answer me this? Whose job is it to follow up complaint cases in the council? And why after 8 months have I not had any response? I leave this, hopefully, for a final time with you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm very sorry you've had to come here and explain what you have had to explain. I was under the impression that your complaint had been responded to. So I'm really sorry if you haven't had something in writing that's more substantial. I'm sure the leader would offer his apologies as well for the way in which you were made to feel and that you still do feel. If we can do anything, leader, by way of recognising formally that the protocol around searching will be done in a most respectful fashion.
Just say absolutely, endorse the words. No, this is supposed to be a place, and in my view it is, from the great majority of people, a welcoming place. I'm sorry that you've had an experience that didn't fit that, and I'll take away the points that are being made.
Well, yes, indeed, Colchester Town Hall is a very welcoming place, especially if you like having a large electronic device shoved between your legs and put all up in your business. Then it is very welcoming indeed. And if you don't want the device, they will touch you all over your personage instead, and then go through all your personal belongings. So yes, it's a very intimate greeting. It could indeed be classed as welcoming. Perhaps we should call it the Colchester Welcome.
Back in touch, and thank you. I do know that our officers did look at this, that courtesy of welcome, getting that balance between, it is appropriate in today's age, unfortunately, between concerns around security and how best to respond to it. I thought that we got that balance right. I know it was looked at. If you hadn't had a response, then we come back to you, make sure if we haven't, that we do, and if we have, that we draw your attention to it.
It just seems a bit pointless to have a complaints procedure where you go onto the website and do it and nothing comes back. So it's a bit.
Can I just check that you provided your personal information, an email, an address?
We've spent the first almost hour of our proceedings with people turning up and saying they are not getting answers when they write to the council. I led that off with the three issues which we considered vitally important. What's in the budget? They were not answered. We had a litany of members of the public who came along and said, we are expecting answers and we have not heard answers. And that seems to be the common theme of the meeting so far. Now, I don't know whether it's our responsibility as a scrutiny panel or whether it's a matter for the chief executive, but I believe we should be making a recommendation, having heard the views that we had this evening, that the communication plan for this council needs looking at, sprucing up. And it just causes me very great concern that people who are writing to us with genuine complaints who need an answer are not getting them, ourselves included as a panel.